Welcome to the Security Weekly News for the week of 5 April 2020 in the time of plague. Today, Zoom bombing, Zoom criminalization, Zoom errors, and Zoom configuration. It's a zoo out there. It's a show about, well, actually, it's about the news, but there was an awful lot of Zoom news. I can't actually get my Zoom instance to actually zoom my camera since they disabled Logi capture in the new version. All this, Jason Wood, and more on today's Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Well, all right. So the news. Zoom bombing. Oh boy, the new buzzword for spamming online meetings. I didn't know what it was called before, but I do now. It may have criminal consequences. The FBI is apparently cracking down on these attacks and targeting bombers with jail time. So, according to this article, the authorities stated that Zoom bombing could result in charges at the state and federal level, including charges of disruption of a public meeting, hate crimes, fraud, and transmitting threatening communications. So let's keep it clean out there, or you might have some serious issues with the FBI. You probably don't want to get tossed into the county jail right now because that sounds pretty horrible, I think. Maybe. I don't know anybody in the county jail, but you probably don't want to go there. Except Joe Exotic. I do know that Joe Exotic is in jail, so I have learned that. So I learned something about the world. I had never heard of this, and now it's like all anybody can talk about is Joe Exotic. I'm going to get my hair like tinted or something. All right. In that same light, Zoom has now been banned from the use for any government business in Taiwan. This was due to some of the Zoom traffic being routed through Beijing in China. Zoom did release a statement saying that the routing was done by mistake, that it's been taken care of, but Taiwan went ahead and actually banned the use of Zoom by any government entities there because it was being sent off through the People's Republic of China. If you aren't familiar with the history of Taiwan and China, well, it's a complicated one. And we could spend a lot of days talking about, is Taiwan an independent country? Is it a part of China? Did Sun Yat-sen say what they thought that Sun Yat-sen said? Well, it's not clear. But regardless of all that, they don't like each other very much. At the same time, Zoom's zooming popularity, I couldn't resist, has produced a lot more focus from attackers who are working to exploit the vast increase in the number of users of this platform. Cryptocurrency miner malware was actually found bundled inside of a legitimate Zoom installer. And I'm presuming from reading that the legitimate Zoom installer obviously is, it said legitimate, but it can't really be, but it really does install Zoom. People have been distributing these things around over the last week on download sites and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity because, again, a lot of new people have entered this realm who are not very familiar with any of this stuff, and they're really being targeted by this. And I'm talking about a lot of this because I know all of you know this stuff. But I like to talk about this because I want to be sure that all of you are making your users and your organizations aware and taking extra precautions because suddenly you do have a much larger number of people who are working in that. It's likely that other malware is also being bundled the same way in Zoom downloads, and we got more and more people downloading this stuff every day. It's getting complicated. In fact, as a personal experience of this, I would personally note that Zoom version 4.6.9, hi Zoom, recently apparently put some kind of fix in for some other problems that were detected last week. And this particular version disabled the use of Logi capture, which is what I use to manage my cam. And that doesn't work anymore. And I was unable to get my Zoom app to actually zoom my cam without using Logi capture. And I went looking for a old version of Zoom to download, and I immediately got nervous because I saw lots of people offering up old version of Zoom for download free, and you're like, okay, maybe that could be a little bit scary. I haven't had a response from them yet. You know who you are. But with Zoom growing thousands and thousands of video calls every day and more meetings, this next article was about how many meetings are left exposed on the open web. This is primarily due to and I'll use the word ineptitude. I'm sorry, folks. I know some people that are doing this are new, and you'll learn. But the ineptitude of the cadres of new meeting hosts who are unfamiliar with the product and online meetings in general, rather than, to me, a fault in the product itself. If you put your meetings up and you leave them public, and I think a lot of organizations told people to use this, schools, hospital, I mean, everybody's using Zoom for something or other, and it was the easiest course was to have them just trigger a meeting that was left to the public. And they sort of assumed, well, people would figure out that they need to not let other people host and they need to mute all the mics and all this. And as a result, they've ended up having not only the Zoom bombing problem, but they've started having issues in terms of people capturing proprietary meetings and then re-airing them elsewhere. So there's been quite a few instances of that. There's the instance of people capturing documents off of these meetings and so forth. So I would really advise you to get some security guidance out to your users about safe hosting and good hygiene practices on that. I did put a link to an article on the site about that. And I did want to I'm going to scan to one other story, and they're going to hate me for this. I was sorry. I'm going to find my other story here. Sorry. So hang on a second, Johnny. And Gary Berman did release a new edition of the CyberHero Adventures comic called Defending Your Health. So this new edition was really focused on the healthcare industry and did a lot of examination of different medical devices and so on. If you don't know Gary, he's done some CyberHero comics in the past for DEF CON and so forth. Really great guy. So go and check that out. I did put a link to that on the site in the wiki, so you can definitely check that out. Zoom's video stock price, and here's the important thing for you to wait for, ticker ZZM as in Mike, has spiraled to all-time highs, but it's interesting that Zoom Technology, ticker ZOOM, which is a Chinese-based microcommunications hardware company, has seen their share price spike about 50% in one day as investors get ZOOM and ZMike confused. So Zoom Video's, though, price has been falling significantly in recent days as worries about the overvaluation of the stock kicked in. The price on the stock this morning was about $118 per share. I also wanted to mention OSINT today to you as well. I don't have any articles about this, so sorry, Johnny, giving you a hard one today. But I'm not going to say what I was thinking. But as you start broadcasting in your home environs, and this is just because I've seen this so much lately, remember with that HD video that you're watching me on, or you're watching all those people in the meeting on, people are freezing the frames, and you can capture, and this is stuff that I've seen recently, nude flashes in the background. Yep, I'm not kidding. Passwords, I did not see a password, but I saw something written on a piece of paper that could have been a password. as well as other information on the wall. I started to actually write a bunch of fake passwords on my wall just to mess with people, but I decided not to. But I have seen also the make and model of home security systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you may want to use, be sure and use a virtual background, or just, get an old shower curtain and hang it behind you like I've done. And, that might help keep people from seeing the shower stall that's right behind the curtain. Actually, it's not behind my curtain, but I think there's a GIMP suit or something back there. You may also remember that just because there's a threat and there's a person in a little video box, that doesn't mean that any people out there aren't doing bad things and taking notes about how to do bad things in the future. So protect your recordings and don't give away any private information in public places. This is a very, very big problem that everybody's been running into. Bad bot traffic made up about 31% of e-commerce traffic in a study that came out by Radware Research in February. About 58% of those bots that they were studying were able to effectively mimic human e-commerce behavior, and 45% of the bad bot traffic were using human behavior mimicry to get around various types of filters. So many of the bad bots were being used to do everything from e-commerce to spreading propaganda. And there was a large increase apparently in March. This was a tack on that about COVID-19 and the elections. All were being used. It's an interesting report to read, and it shows the increase in automated attacks on APIs is expected to continue to increase by these bots. As APIs are used more and more to allow all these different web applications to communicate, a la something like Amazon Lambda. And I'm not saying Amazon Lambda has a problem with this. I'm just saying that is an example of a type of thing that you might say. I really like this article because I like playing with bots. It's gotten very easy to create them with things like Chatterbot or other tools on GitHub. And the ability of these pre-built APIs to emulate human response is just amazing. And I was so happy when I got my bot to actually turn around and swear at me. I'd been trying to teach it swear words for several days. I know, juvenile, whatever. But I had to have something for it to do, and I was just having fun playing with it in the lab. With that, when we return, we will welcome back the sexiest cybersecurity survivalist we know, Jason Wood from The Bunker, with expert commentary on new ransomware innovations. So stick around.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome back to the Security Weekly News, and now joining us, Jason Wood is going to talk about, and this is a big area, new ransomware innovations. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Doug. That was quite an introduction there. I have never been called the sexy cybersecurity survivalist before.
You know you love me.
So yeah, I actually was focusing in on some of the ransomware, the changes that are occurring out there right now. And I've got a link to one of the articles I ran into. There are some others that I bumped into that I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. But the interesting thing that I think maybe we make a mistake on is that sometimes we look at things like ransomware and what's going on here, and we maybe forget that the groups that are behind ransomware are actually businesses in their mind, and they have a number of the same pressures that legitimate businesses actually face. In particular, they like the idea of keeping their revenues up and will spend some time strategizing and figuring out how to make improvements on that. Excuse me. So in that vein, apparently sales, if you will, in quotes, has been impacted as companies are getting better at recovering from ransomware attacks. At least some of them. There are plenty of others that haven't done quite so well. But regardless, may not be as much as we would like. The recovery efforts of some folks have at least made it to where ransomware organizations have decided to make some changes in how they conduct their business. So to add some pressure to get people to pay up, they have resorted to the idea of using some bad publicity to pressure organizations to pay the ransom. So how does this work? Well, I mean, typical ransomware type of attack. The attacker gets onto the system, starts copying their tools in place. They may do some reconnaissance to find other hosts in the network. A lot of times I see, as I'm doing analysis on these types of intrusions, they've stolen credentials already, so they're looking for some other hosts to pivot to. But very quickly, they move on to the idea of, hey, we need to unlock files that are in use and then deploy the ransomware and lock everything up. The new twist on this is that the attackers are taking at least some amount of this data on this system and copying it up to their infrastructure. By copying it up to their infrastructure, they now have it in their possession to do with it what they will. Then they lock up the system with the ransomware and encrypt all the data. And then in the note, they basically explain, hey, we've locked up your data. Here's how you pay for it and the whole bit. If you don't pay for it in this period of time, then we're going to release the data that we actually stole as well to the public. So, you're not going to be able to say that you didn't have some kind of intrusion in your environment. It may be rather limited type of information because it's going to be just what's on that host or whatever host they spread to. But now you have the added pressure of, hey, we're going to get some bad publicity if it gets out there that our data is being released publicly, and potentially, releasing information about other individuals, customers who would really not like to have have themselves exposed in that way. So, and then you'll also see, I've read some reports as well where they've, not only are they going to release data, they are going to increase the prices if you delay on paying out. So that is one of the methods that they're using to increase their revenue and make sure that we are being good to paying customers in their minds by giving them money to give us our own data back. Another change that's out there is some change in tactics, actually, in how the ransomware gets deployed. Very common to see, again, the attacker gets on the system. They use some PowerShell commands to deploy the ransomware on the host. And as there's more focus being put on malicious ransomware commands being used in this type of situation, they're starting to change up their tooling a little bit, using mshta.exe to essentially download and execute their payloads and then kick the ransomware off. And the idea here is just to try and sidestep some of these preventions. Obviously, this is going to be very visible. They want it to be visible once the encryption has taken place, but they at least want to get enough time to lock up the data and not have it be prevented. So they're changing tactics up that way by just changing their point of execution. And as I mentioned earlier, these groups are operating like in a way that we would think of as a legitimate business would try and do, and strategize on how to make improvements and improve their bottom line. One of the really interesting to me business models out there that's at play in ransomware is the concept of ransomware as a service, or RaaS. In this case, individuals or smaller groups decide they want to get in on the ransomware game and start making some money, but they don't have the skills or maybe the time to build out the ransomware, to create the infrastructure needed to host it, to deploy it, to manage the payments, unlocking things, stuff like that. I mean, there's a significant back end here that's going on. And some of the established ransomware groups have actually expanded to offer ransomware as a service. You sign up and become an affiliate with them. Now you have to go through some You have to be somebody known to them that they don't want to just let anybody in here and become an affiliate because they don't like the idea of getting arrested. But they are spreading out to affiliates and providing their software and their infrastructure as a service to the actual attackers, who will then go out and spread the ransomware to wherever they can get into. And a lot of times they're what I'm observing, for example, in intrusions, is they do something like password spraying or something like that to get valid credentials. They log into the system, deploy their stuff, and we're seeing this common tool set to particular threat actor groups, but they are spread out amongst all of their affiliates. And it's whatever focus that those individuals who have become affiliates decide to go after. They may be good at deploying their tools, but this way they don't have to worry about all of the back end stuff. And there's a revenue sharing model where basically the ransomware as a service provider gets a split of the money that's paid out, and then over time more of that money moves towards the percentage of that movie increases for the person who is spreading the ransomware as it become more effective, and the ransomware as a service provider recoups some of their investment of setting all of this up. What I think is interesting about all of these points here is the idea that we need to kind of keep in mind who our adversaries are. We've heard in over the years, of course, about nation states and stuff like that, and people play that up or down depending on their organization or their personal feelings about it and things like that. And we think of the individual or the small groups of attackers that are out doing things, but we have this middle ground out here where we have some fairly sophisticated folks who aren't nation states, but neither are they small number of people sitting in their basements who are building some reasonably well thought out and operations to extort money out of people. And so I think what's important for us as security professionals to do is we may look at all of this and say, yeah, I knew about all of that. But if we incorporated that into our threat models and communicated that to our management and explained that, hey, these are also the groups that we're going after. Here are some of their capabilities and stuff. And are we keeping our management up to date on the different things that may happen? Hey, here's what we did to prevent or improve our ability to recover from ransomware attacks as well as prevent ransomware attacks. But if one gets through, we may find that the attacker themselves will threaten us with the release of information that they stole during this process. If you pop that on senior management and surprise them with it when they thought they were aware of ransomware and the impact, but you hit them with this new surprise, that's probably not going to go real well for us. So we want to make sure that we're keeping those folks up to date and know what the expectations are or risks are, so that they can manage their expectations, and so that we can come up with some strategies on how we're going to respond to that organization. What are we going to do if we get threatened with the release of data off of somebody in accounting's laptop, for example? So these are all just things we need to keep in mind. Build that into your threat models. Make sure you're communicating with management, and obviously pay attention to this area. It is a area that is a business to these individuals, as illegitimate as it may be, and they are actively spending time and money to build up their capabilities and deploy that throughout all of our companies out here as victims.
All right. Thank you, Jason. That's I think that's really critical. We see more and more stories about that all the time. Ransomware people are getting very sophisticated, and they are coming after you at all levels, so be aware. Finally, no grad student likes to hear we're getting ready to read an 18th century book. But I read one in grad school, and there was an article about it today. In the 18th century, Erich Beinhocker wrote The Origin of Wealth, which was an examination of economics and a discussion of how various organisms as a use sort of independence as a mechanism for transformation of entropy into order and information. And of course, this has its own benefits to those organisms. And then when they're restricted, that doesn't happen. So it's kind of an early, free markets kind of thing. This particular article I provided talks about how this same idea kind of applies to AI. And especially in the sense that we shouldn't just try to mimic biology, which is something I've been saying for a long time, that it didn't make sense to me that we just make AIs that act like humans, because humans behave pretty stupidly for the most part, as we can well observe in the news today. But basically, I was always felt like, we shouldn't try to code AI. And I remember talking about this in an artificial intelligence class that I was taking long, long ago. But that maybe AI creates its own brave new world, which is scary to a lot of people, because if we don't understand it, one of the main ideas explored in Neuromancer and so forth. So this article is well worth a read if you don't want to go back and read an 18th century economics treatise, which you probably don't. But I'm trying to be optimistic. So, let's do that. And yes, Roger Williams University has online cybersecurity programs. I'm Doug White from Roger Williams Online Program. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the the Security Weekly News wrap up. Wash your hands and stay away from everybody.